Have you guys ever noticed how we want other people to think we become something without actually having to become that thing? Now, don't raise your hand on this, but some of you guys I know have profiles in the online dating world. Do not raise your hands, okay? Because I don't get a cut or commission from those sort of things, but real life stuff, like meeting in person here on Sunday, the pastor gets a commission every time there's a marriage out of, especially the 11 o'clock group, okay? But I do want to say this. Some of you aren't telling the truth with your profiles. I mean, do you use a picture from your current season of life or from when you were 20 pounds lighter? Anybody? How many of you, when you write about what you're amazing at, how many of you are fibbing don't raise your hands, just fibbing just a little bit? You see, we have this habit of wanting to appear like we are something without putting the work into becoming that thing. Have you ever seen a hotel's website and it looks incredible, so you book it and you arrive at the hotel and you're like, there's a place I've traveled a few times in the world, the same place. I've always stayed at the same hotel. Their website from the very first day had a picture of a swimming pool. I've been there 3 times, and I've never seen a swimming pool. I'm like, what? Whose pool is this? You know what I mean? But they want to appear like they've got something going on without putting the hard work in of actually having that thing going on. Now, for me, this is what it looks like in my life, just so you can recognize it. If I'm walking the Embarcadero, but I'm wearing workout clothes, but I'm just walking the Embarcadero on a beautiful day, like today. The sun's already coming through. If I'm just walking in my workout clothes, but I see someone that I know, likely one of you, guess what I start doing? I mean, I can't even be pastoral at this moment because I got to stay with it. You know, I'm just a runner. But you know what I do as soon as I pass you? I look back to make sure you aren't looking at me, and then I start walking. I want you to think that I'm a runner without having to put the work into actually becoming a runner. And we do this in so many areas of our lives, and we do it when it comes to our spiritual lives. We want to project an image of spiritual maturity without having to adhere to a process to become that spiritually mature person, right? We want to kind of let people know, like, hey, no, I've got it all together, because let's be honest, we can be a poser and fake each other out when we're here on a Sunday talking for a few minutes, can't we? Or talking for a lot of minutes in my case. I can project something and be completely different in my real life, especially when my wife isn't in the service, like right now. Right? You can project something in an epic group and it not be true at all. And we do this with our spiritual growth, but what we've been saying in this Form series is this kind of thing. We want to begin to care less about our appearances and more about the actual substance of our lives. Let me say that again. I think it's even tweet-worthy or Instagram story-worthy or whatever your thing is, Facebook, those of you that just take it down on paper. We need to begin caring less about our appearances and be much more interested in what is the actual substance of our lives. And here's something that's so fascinating. Oftentimes, we want people to think we are something without becoming that thing. But here's what's interesting. When you are formed into the man or woman God created you to be, what begins to happen is you don't begin to care more about appearances, you begin to care less. You're so locked in on who God's made you to be, you're so locked in on who God is to you, that in the early days of our lives, or our spiritual lives, we want to project something but not put in the work to do it. But when you allow God to form you, what's amazing is that you and I begin to care less about appearances. We begin to care less about appearances. We are putting the Formed series to bed today. I have loved this series. I've learned so much personally, so much feedback from you. We are using handouts in this series, so if you have one, grab it. If you don't, raise your hand. We will get one to you, and you can follow along. Just keep your hands up high so our team, our hospitality team that wants to host you well here, they will make sure you're equipped with the handout. This is the last day. We'll be using handouts for a while, so if that makes you excited or depresses you, I'm glad or I'm sorry. Right up here in the front, we got hands up here. And just so you know, I'm kind of elated about, handouts aren't my normal thing, like in terms of style and what I enjoy doing. Maybe it's so that you don't have my script and I can change it when I want to. Maybe that's my thing, but we have been in this Form series where we're just looking at who does God want us to be and how do we become that. Anyone still need a handout before we get going? Great. Well, if you look at the title of the talk for today at the top of your page, here it is, Not an Instagram Servant. not an Instagram servant. And I want to launch that idea with this first quote from Richard Foster in Celebration of Discipline, which has been a guide for us in the series. Foster says, "It is one thing to act like a servant. It is quite another to be a servant." It is one thing to act like a servant. It is one thing to have that Instagram moment where someone's got the camera and lights on you. Anybody can serve in that moment, can't you? And you, please take this picture now because I don't serve too often, so get me going. It is one thing to do an act of service. Is it a completely different thing to become a servant? It is one thing even to serve within Epic Church. It is a different thing to have a 24/7 lifestyle as a servant. It is one thing to go on a mission trip to Uganda, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. It is another thing to live your life as missional. Does that make sense? And you guys know this already if you've been around this series at all. In this Form series, we aren't just trying to do something here or there. We're trying to become someone, right? If we become the right kinds of people, we won't have to think so much about what we're doing with our activities. If we become the right kinds of people, we will just live that out. If you become a servant, you will serve. If you serve occasionally, you may never necessarily become a servant. There's a difference between acting like a servant in a moment or in a week, or in an hour on Sunday, and actually becoming a servant. The desire to serve is not inherent within any of us. The desire to appear to be a servant, maybe. But it's not inherent. What's inherent within us is to be significant. What's inherent within us is to be successful. What's inherent within us is to be fulfilled and to be great. And all humans have been like that from the very beginning of time. In fact, even after spending quite a bit of time with Jesus, his disciples still had no clue the kind of kingdom that he was ushering in. The disciples still had no clue of what he was trying to bring about. They had a world understanding of how leadership and greatness and kingdoms work, but they were really lost when it came to how Jesus wanted them to interpret the idea of kingdom. So if you remember, there was a particular day, and on this day, the disciples come up to Jesus, two of them do, and they say, "Hey, Jesus, we know you're the big deal. We know you're the king. We know you're the president and CEO, but we also know that you're going to need someone to your right and to your left. Can we be that someone?" One text says that their mom went up and asked Jesus about this. No one's having their mom ask people out on dates or interview for you or anything, right? So they come to Jesus and they're like, "Hey, we want to know when the kingdom ushers itself in, when you are on a throne," and they're right to some degree with that idea of his kingship, when you're in that moment, when that time comes, can we flank you to your right and to your left? Like you're the gold, but we would love to play silver and bronze. And Jesus wants them to understand they have no idea what they are asking. Stand with me as we look at the text on the sheet. Mark 10, 42 through 45, here's what Mark records, and here's what he says Jesus said. "And Jesus called them to him." Those are the disciples. So he's just saying, hey, come in close so you don't miss this. He said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them, but it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you guys must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." You may be seated. There's a statement that shows up here from Jesus, and I want you to underline it, put a box around it, whatever will help it stand out to you. Here's the statement: "But it shall not be so among you." But it shall not be so among you. This statement should be reverberating in our hearts, our minds, and our lives on a daily basis. Here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying to the disciples and to us today, you astutely observe how the world works, but my kingdom's doing a different kind of thing. He's constantly saying this, and there's a pattern here. Here's the way Paul said his version of this statement from Jesus. Romans 12:2, Paul says, "Do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Don't live according to the world's pattern, be transformed. And so Jesus is constantly telling us, yes, you astutely observe how the world, how the culture, how your city, how your company works, but that's not how it's going to be in my kingdom. And so you can think about this statement in so many different facets of your life. This statement, but it shall not be so among you. Let's think about the greed generosity idea. Jesus is like, you rightly observe that the world is fairly greedy, at least the average person is fairly greedy, but it shall not be so among you. You should be generous. If you look astutely at the world, you will begin to see that everyone lives in a me-first ideology. And Jesus is going, hey, yes, me first is what the world says, but come on, it shall not be so among you, me last. And he's constantly doing that. So in this text, Jesus goes, you know what leadership looks like out there. You know what authority looks like. You know what power looks like. You know what privilege looks like. You know what title and position looks like. That isn't how it works in my kingdom. How can I tell you guys clearly? Here's how. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. They're like, oh, dang. It's that kind of kingdom? And all of a sudden, no one's volunteering to be on the right and the left. Where in your life, in this area or any other area, is Jesus trying to say, I know you think you should live like everyone else, but it shall not be so among you. But you're like, God, but my coworkers, but my neighbors, but people even at our church, and he's like, yep, but it shall not be so among you. I've called you to follow me, not the world. And we're always in the tension, aren't we? Especially living in a place like this. We're always in that tension of, okay, what does that look like? And just want to ask you. And there are times, you need to understand this, there are times where God absolutely affirms what's dominant in culture, right? If we live in a culture, which we do, that cares about justice, at least to some degree, that's affirming. God's not going, hey, but don't do that. But oftentimes, when you see something that's happening as a pattern in our world, God is saying, I want you to do the exact opposite. Notice what Jesus says when they ask for greatness and have position. Jesus didn't say, you can't have the first spot, but you can have the second. Did he? What did he say? You can't have the first spot, but you can have the last. He said to be great, you don't just need to be average. He says you need to be a servant of all. And so ask yourself this question. Where is Jesus saying to me in this season of my spiritual growth, but it shall not be so among you? But it shall not be so among you. Maybe it's in your parenting. There's a way parenting works in the dominant world. He's going, hey, as a mom or dad, that's not what your job is, though. Right? There's a way integrity or a lack of integrity may work in your industry or in your own company. God's going, hey, but it shall not be so among you. And you're like, God, what if I lose my job? He's like, I don't know, maybe I'll take care of you. Right? Where is he saying to you, but it shall not be so with you? There is perhaps no greater way to identify with Jesus than when we become a servant. That's the next blank on your handout. There may be no better way to identify with Jesus than when you or when we become a servant. Have you ever been watching a movie and you assume that you know how the plot's going to play out? I know, you're like, Ben, I just have this gift. No, it's just that 80% of movies all kind of go the same way. So you think the plot is going to play out a particular way, but then something is different. A character comes on the scene that you didn't know, or, at least you thought they were dead, now they're back to life, and you say something to yourself or a friend like, I didn't see that coming. Or maybe you've walked out of a town hall meeting in your company, and people got promoted that you thought needed to get fired, and people got fired that you thought needed to get promoted, and they shut down the part of the organization that was doing really well, and they gave more dollars to the part that wasn't doing well, and you walk out and you say to your coworker, what? I didn't see that coming. If for a moment you could forget all that you know about the Bible and all that you know about Jesus, but you were to hear today that there was a king over the entire universe, and he was going to write himself into the story, how do you think that king would write himself into the story? As a hero, as the big deal, as the powerful, as the elitist. How does our king write himself into the story? As a servant. We would have all done that, right? No, we love to play hero. And the hero of all of history is going, hey, I will. There's not a director telling him you've got to be a servant, right? It's not that he auditioned and they're like, hey, you have a little bit of talent. You can't have the lead role. We're going to make you a servant. He's going, hey, I will willingly become a servant. Not for an Instagram moment, but this is who I will be to my very core. For even the Son of Man didn't come to serve, but to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. In that verse 45, where you see to serve and to give, you can change the word "and" out by just putting the word "by" in there. It's not like he served and then he did this other thing, gave his life away. It's that he served by giving his life away. But if you were to read that the King of the universe wrote himself into history's great narrative as a servant, you would just be like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And this is what God wants the reaction of people in our lives to be. People do not expect you to serve them unless there's some string attached. God expects people to walk away from encounters with his followers going, wow, I didn't see that coming. I cannot believe she cares for me. I cannot believe they brought me a meal. I cannot believe that they want to care so much that they really are going to show up at my mom's funeral. To walk away going, I didn't see that coming. That's what God wants us to do. Not for shock's sake, not just to be shocked, but because that's what happens when we serve with the Spirit of Jesus. So are you primarily living to be served or to serve? That's the next spot there on your handout. Are you primarily, is your main bent towards being served? If you think about the lens by which you view your entire life, is it to be served or is it to serve? Now, there's a good question that you can ask. It's fair. If you become a servant, then who's going to take care of you? That's a good question. If you begin to focus not on yourself, then who's got your back? If you begin to meet the needs of other people, who is going to really meet your needs? Two answers. The first one is this: God's going to. God is going to meet your needs. 1 Peter 5:7, Peter writes, cast all your cares or anxieties upon him because he cares for you. Matthew 11, Jesus says, bring me all that you've got, and I'm going to lighten your load and give you rest. The psalmist said in Psalm 121, I lift my eyes up to the hills. From where does my help come from? And then he answers by saying, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. You need to drop the act of scarcity when it comes to service by thinking if you begin to focus on others, nobody's got your back. Oh, somebody does have your back. And I think to the degree we're willing to live out the service model that Jesus offered us, God may take care of us even a little bit more. Not in a like tit for tat thing, but in a, hey, you're giving of yourself, I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to just let you know that. Number two answer to the question, who's going to take care of you, is intended to be this answer: your church community. Your church community. But if you stay disconnected, you have no church community, and that answer can't come your way. If nobody here knows you, we cannot serve you well. Now, you guys know our environment here at Epic, which is one in which we want anyone to feel welcome to enter anonymously, and you can stay anonymous as long as you want. But if you stay anonymous, you will live an isolated life, and when it is a need arises in your life, none of us are going to know about it because we don't know you. So we're not pushing this groups thing constantly because if we hit a certain number, Lindsay gets a raise. I mean, if she hits like 1,200, I'll give her a raise. You know, that's like more than twice our average weekly deal. But we do it because we believe that it's crucial for your life, that there are no Lone Ranger Christians, that there is no one, even if they have faith in God, God still doesn't say that he's enough in that way. He's created you to need other people. He's created other people to serve you and to be served by you. And if you remain anonymous, you're on your own, not because we want you to be. We continue to say, join community, be a part, join a serving team. And to the degree that you don't take us up on that, we don't know how else to help you unless we get to know you in some other avenue. Join a group. Now, next I want to flow into some practical ways to serve. And if you look at these on the surface, you're going to go, that's so obvious. But my point to you is, if it's so obvious, why can't we do it? And the reason we can't just serve in these practical ways oftentimes is because we aren't willing to lose ourselves or die to ourselves or to follow Jesus through the path of service. But if we do these practical things in the right spirit, then our lives will begin to look like the life of the ultimate servant himself. Here's the first one. Find ways to be helpful and meet needs. Like, Ben, that's that's amazing. No, it's really practical. Find ways to be helpful and meet needs. Sometimes all you need to do is pay attention. Sometimes you need to take the blinders off of just seeing your own life and your own needs and just look and see, like, how can I practically meet those needs? And when it comes to meeting the needs of other people, make sure you're about, as a servant, meeting their needs and not meeting the need you have as a servant. Anybody besides me buy gifts for people that you really like, even if they don't? It works out really well, right? Because if they like the gift you give them and you live in close proximity to them, you can borrow it sometimes. If they don't like the gift that you give them, even better. Right? Even better. When it comes to serving people and meeting their needs, make sure it's not about your need to be known or to be seen as a servant in a particular way. Number 2, practice the art of listening. Foster writes in that next blank, the things that are required when it comes to listening are these 2 things, compassion and patience. Compassion and patience. And if you're like me, you have an endless supply of both. Or not. Compassion and patience. We need to be better listeners. He goes on to say in this chapter on serving, he goes on to say that this is very freeing. He says, we do not need to have all of the correct answers to be able to listen well. Isn't that freeing? Because I feel like if I'm going to become a better listener, I've got to immediately answer your question and tell you how I can fix it. But when I occasionally listen well to someone, I can say 3 or 4 words and they walk away from the meeting going, thank you so much for changing my life. I'm like, I didn't tell you anything. Do you know what listening can do? It's powerful, and it can just meet a need. They need to tell someone. They need to sometimes unload and just let them do that and listen to them. If you can offer help and you have wisdom on that, go for it. If you're just listening, though, that's not a service in vain. Number 3, practice hospitality. Practice hospitality. Romans 12:13 says, what does it say? Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Again, you can take the word and there and change it to by. Contribute to the needs of the saints by seeking to show hospitality. There are some people in our church who do an amazing job. Hospitality, unlike I have never seen in my life. The way they open their home, the way they always have something to drink, something to eat. It doesn't mean that that the house always has to be completely clean. Speaking of wanting to appear one way, but not putting the work in to actually make that an ongoing reality. But hospitality is crazy. Now, some of you are like, Ben, I would love to do the hospitality thing, but I am the only person that literally fits in my home. You get a pass. But for the rest of us, here's what Foster says on the back. There's a desperate need today for Christians who will open their homes to one another. There's a desperate need today for Christians who will open their homes to one another. It doesn't mean you're serving people on fine china. It doesn't mean that something's baking when everyone walks in. It doesn't mean that everything is completely put away. We don't want a clean home from you. We just want a space where we can share life with you. This is what we need to grow in. And some of us don't do hospitality for a few reasons. 1, we hate vulnerability. 2, we wish our home was nicer, and so what is so-and-so going to think that actually lives in a nicer home? Let's get over ourselves. Let's invite people in. It doesn't have to be something spectacular. It doesn't have to be an event. It doesn't have to be a party. It can just be them eavesdropping in on how you put your kids to bed at night. It can be them stopping by to grab a slice of pizza. One great deal that works is you offer hospitality, they bring the food. Seriously, this is a great deal, by the way. All right? How many of you are like, some of you are like, I will never let anyone in my home, but I will Grubhub all night long. Anybody? Like, you have no problem stopping by to get the food, but nobody's coming in your home. All right, well, those of you who don't want to buy the food, but you've got a place to live, figure this out. Come together. Show hospitality. The 4th one is pray for opportunities. I'm telling you, if we'll just pay attention and invite God to lead us in, people will show up. Here's a model prayer we can pray with this idea. Lord Jesus, as it would please you, bring me someone today whom I can serve. Practical needs. We want to make serving about Africa, and we are going to tell you about that in a moment. That's part of it. We want to make serving about being on the stage and doing something grand. The small part of it. Serving is about the day in, day out, seeing where people are, hearing their story, knowing what's going on in their lives this week, seeing what they need, and just meeting that need. We think it's got to be expensive or it's got to take hours and hours out of my life. No, you just need to be intentional. So much of this is already present in our church. I'll tell you one story that just illustrates how easy and practical and yet helpful serving can be. There's a young lady in our church, and she has a newborn daughter, and she has, I think, a 2-year-old daughter. and her husband is out of town for a few weeks here in September coming up. And by the way, he's not out of town because he had a choice, okay? Any of you brand new dads after the baby's been born that ask your boss to schedule travel for you after the baby's born? Bad idea, guys, all right? This guy can't get out of it. It's a thing that he's committed to. So what a friend of this lady, she sent out an email to a number of other people in our church community and said, hey, her husband's going out of town. She's got a newborn. Here's a calendar. Here's a Google Doc, and I want you guys to fill in what day you could help, what time you could help, and how you could help. And I'm holding the evidence of that Google Doc right now. And this will just let you know what amazing things service can do. So I won't share everyone's name, but so there are these two sisters in our church who said on August 8th, they're going to help with the end-of-day routine. And some of you are like, I don't know what that involves, Ben, but if I did, maybe I would commit to it. It just involves showing up and serving, putting the kids to bed. A mom and a daughter said on August 11th, they delivered dinner and were going to provide whatever was needed between noon and 2 p.m. September 20th, maybe my favorite. Someone in our church was going after 5 o'clock or so to bring burritos and stay to help with the end-of-day routine, laundry, house cleaning, anything needed. It's not so advanced, friends. Show up and help. And when we do it together, only one or two people are on here multiple times. Now, this is an interesting one that I'm unsure about, but on Monday, September 12th, there's a family called the Pilgreen family offering evening entertainment. I'm so glad I'm part of a large family. I don't have to come up with all of that. I don't even know what that is. Serving isn't rocket science, but if you have the right heart, the difference that it can make. Just a huge example of what that can look like. We have a international student from Nigeria, and he had to get out of his dorms between sessions, and we were able to reach out to someone else from his homeland, and that guy took him into his home. Didn't really know him. Took him into his home for 4 nights. Not because he had a ton of extra space, did not have an extra bedroom. But friends, that's what serving can look like. It is the small and it is the large. You guys know here at Epic we have, kind of the 3 hallmarks of what we want to always do as a church are our weekend worship gatherings, community throughout the week, and then serving locally, nationally and internationally. And locally, we have some amazing partnerships. We have a partnership with City Impact and the Tenderloin, where they're helping to intervene and rescue people out of poverty and addiction, and they're trying to bring whole life health into the people's lives there. One really cool story to update you on is we have a young adult leader in our church, Mark Dan, who has just agreed and started 2 weeks ago to be a 3rd grade teacher at the City Impact Academy. Huge, man. It's huge. And some of you are like, what's the big deal about that? Ask Mark afterwards and then pray for him on a daily basis. We can't all be 3rd grade teachers over there, but we can all do something. Because Justice Matters, an amazing ministry here that we partner with, trying to take care of and rehabilitate and bring health to women who have been exploited, trafficked, and abused. What our ladies go over and do just Monday afternoons is they hear stories, and they, I don't know how this works, but like manicures and pedicures, I don't know what that's about, but they are just helping those women gain their dignity back while also sharing about the depth of the love of Jesus with them. We partner with Bessie Carmichael School. We did it from day one. Before our church launched weekly services here in Soma, we had a partnership with them. In fact, our very first preview service, October 10th, 2010, we gave 100% of our offering that day to Bessie Carmichael, and we've continued to show up there. Family fun days. We've continued to be helpful and tutor and do things like that. And we just redid their teacher's lounge. So let me show you a before, like in the action of work picture with a team that went over there recently. And here's what the finished product looks like. Teacher's Lounge and Bessie Carmichael. They sent us 2 cards because all the teachers wrote notes. Let me just share a couple of them. Remember, this is a secular school. Likely, most of these teachers do not share our faith in Jesus. Here's one. Thank you for your generosity and service. We are so thankful for our newly improved space. Another one. We really appreciate your time and your heart. We teachers need positive visuals and reminders of community support. Keep us in your prayers. Do you think even knowing we're a church in the neighborhood that they would have asked us to pray for them if we hadn't shown up and served? That doesn't look radical to us. But they enter that space every day between hours and hours of dealing with kids, many of whom come from homeless situations, right here in Soma. It's a part of Soma maybe many of us don't visit at times. And those teachers get a little respite, right? They get a little refuge, a little place that feels cozy where they can regroup before they go into those classrooms and begin to continue teaching for the day. That's pretty amazing. You guys know we're involved in helping churches get started. We'll be rolling out some new partnerships in the next 2 months, a lot of West Coast stuff, which I'm excited about. We're going to help a guy get a church started in Seattle. We've got 2 Bay Area churches we're going to help get off the ground in Campbell and Mountain View, and then we're going to help a church get going in Burbank. So we'll tell you more about those. We had a chance to serve with Current Silicon Valley down in Mountain View recently. Here's some of our young adults just manning the grill for the day, not during their work hours, outside of their work hours, not within their commitment to Epic Church, even outside of what their commitment to Epic Church is here as volunteers. And so you can go and you can serve through any of these partnerships. International partnerships, pretty amazing things we have going on in Romania with Impact Church. We took a team of 4 there in May. We'll go back there next year. Pastor Adi and his wife Flori from Impact Church, really cool story. We're thrilled to tell you they're going to be here with us October 9th. And so he'll be on the stage with me. We'll do some interview. You can hear about how they started this church coming out of communism after many years in Romania. You'll hear about how they're reaching people, how they're rehabilitating the local hospitals, and you'll be inspired, so much so because he's just a magnetic personality. I think he'll inspire you to go on that trip next year. Maybe we'll charter a jet. But in July, 15 of us went to Uganda to serve with our strategic partner there, United Christian Center Church. And I don't usually give commands here from the stage. I give encouragement, a little bit of challenge occasionally. This is a command, though. Before you walk out the building today, go in the Connection Center and see the storytelling experience from our Uganda trip. Isabel has done an amazing job. She went on the trip with us, put hours and hours of work. So there's an incredible video and then just some high-quality pictures with stories beside them letting you know what we are doing in real life. We're not trying an Instagram moment in Uganda. We're trying to be there and be there for the long term, and you'll be able to see what we're able to do there. This evening, my wife Shauna and I will get on a plane and go to Ireland, Kinsale, Ireland, because we've been invited to try to get an Epic group launched in Ireland. So Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Ireland time, 10 a.m. San Francisco time, Shauna and I will be in the home of a guy who's become a friend here. We will be in his home with his family and 10 to 20 other people trying to cast a vision for them to come on board with starting an Epic group in Ireland. Pray for us, not that we would do what we want, but what God wants and what's needed. But we also want to encourage you guys to serve within Epic Church. So I want you to watch this as you think about jumping in as we head to 3 gatherings here in 3 weeks. The vision of Epic Church, the reason why we exist is to see an increasing number of people in San Francisco orient their entire lives around Jesus. Now, God could make that happen all on His own if He wanted to, but the pattern throughout Scripture and throughout history, and even in our short history here at Epic, is that He gets that accomplished through people like me and people just like you. Something significant happens when people walk in this door and we as a community of faith here at Epic begin to serve them.
I think it might have even been at a young adults party one night, hey, come help. And I was like, okay.
And they did a big call for volunteers at Epic, and I thought, okay, I should try it. I'd had a lot of experience working with kids, but had never worked with them in a Sunday school setting.
I was looking for a church that I could be part of and also get involved in.
I remember coming into service, I got greeted by the same familiar faces every time I came. I wanted to be one of those familiar faces.
It's fun being part of that behind the scenes aspect of every Sunday.
Serving on a team has really been helpful to build relationships. I think coming in, I was one of those churchgoers who would come in on Sunday and then right after service was over, I'd just bolt out that door. And that's kind of how I wanted things for a while. And when I finally decided, no, I should really be rooted in the church and rooted in relationships, there are so many people who are there for me.
People kind of come in maybe from a busy week, and then they're immediately kind of put into this space that hopefully, if we're doing our job well, feels, really welcoming and really familiar.
My favorite part of playing with the band is you have that feeling that we kind of help people meet God.
I just get to be silly and play and get to be creative with crafts, and then also study the Bible together. So just to be in a place where I'm known is amazing, and to be known by the kids and their families and by my friends who are there.
This past Easter service, we had run out of Bibles inside the auditorium, and I bolted out of there, started screaming. I was like, I need Bibles. I need Bibles.
Serving takes you out of just that sort of small group that you're in.
It's amazing how God is using us or me in this church and this environment.
Basically, just do it. It's fun.
Just jump in.
Play your part.
So jump in, join one of our serving teams, and see what God's going to do in you and through you and in this city.
Someone get me a Bible.
Please get Katie a Bible. Please. We've been talking all morning about becoming a servant, and one of the great ways, whether it's a cause-effect relationship, whichever way you choose it, if you are a servant, this is a great way to practice your serving. If you're desiring to become a servant, this is a great way to get exposed to what that could look like. And I just want to invite you to jump in. There's a card in your program just about which gathering you'll attend, but especially we're trying to recruit enough people to be on our team so that we all don't have to serve all the time, that God would use you when you're available and willing to serve and make a difference in the people whose lives we think are going to be added to this congregation in the next few months. We're expecting some significant things, so we're going to the third gathering, but we can't just make space for people to come in here. We've got to create opportunities and have people jump on board that want to serve with us. Now, having said everything I've said, let me just say one thing that might surprise you. Some of you don't need to serve in this season. Some of you, you're exhausted from life. Maybe there's some mental things going on. Maybe there's a season of depression. Maybe you're just worn out. And the reason I'm saying this to you is not because you have an issue with the principle of the discipline of serving. It's that you struggle with the discipline of receiving. And so just hear from my voice, giving, I think, a handful of you permission not to serve in this season. You may think, Ben, I know a lot about organizational leadership. Why would the leader of this organization ever stand up and give people permission when you're going to a third gathering and you need so many more people that are going to be volunteering? Because the rest of us are going to jump in. The rest of us are going to pick up the rope. The rest of us are going to step in and play our part. And so if you aren't on a serving team and you have no good reason not to be, I want to encourage you to fill out that form before you go. Seriously. Why not? You'll be able to set your schedule. We won't tell you can't go out of town. There's none of that. But there's a part for you here to play, and I just want to encourage you. God wants you to play it. If it's the season of rest from serving for you, then you need to be obedient to that. Otherwise, you need to be willing to jump in with whatever God would lead you to do in this season. We'll end this form series and today's message with these two verses on the back. Speaking of Jesus from Philippians 2, but Jesus emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Last point I want to make is this. Let's make sure we aren't dare saying to Jesus, thank you for serving me with your death on a cross, but I refuse to serve in the way that you did. Let's pray. Jesus, we are so humbled and we're so grateful for the humility you took on. That you didn't just have an Instagram moment where the lights were on you and you wanted to show people you looked like a servant. You became the greatest servant of all. You stepped off of a throne. You stepped into a world and you said, I will wrap the towel around my waist. I will wash the feet. I will care for the poor. I will serve. Even though I'm the Son of God, I came to serve, not to be served, to give my life as a ransom for many. Jesus, lead us to give our lives away in service for the sake of the many that you want to bring into our church community, God, and into our personal lives. And God, it will be a beautiful thing to see an entire church community here at Epic become people who don't just look like servants when you catch them throughout the week, but they adopt that lifestyle in a 24/7 way. May it be so in the name of Jesus. Amen. Let's stand and worship and just ask God to come and fill us.